Close your eyes. Let the heavy weight of the present day slide off your shoulders like a silk robe slipping to the floor, leaving you light, unburdened, and ready to drift. The artificial glow of your screen is fading now, replaced by the velvet darkness of your own imagination, a theater where we can travel anywhere, anywhen. We are going back, deep, deep back, before cities, before fire, before words were carved into stone. We are descending through the layers of time, past the Romans, past the pyramids, past the first flickering campfires of the Ice Age, dropping down into the humid, verdant cradle of the late Miocene some 6 million years ago. Breathe in. Can you smell it? The air here is thick with the scent of crushed ferns, damp earth, and the sweet, heavy perfume of ripening figs. Above you, the canopy is a living cathedral of green, filtering the fierce African sun into a soft, dappled twilight that dances on the forest floor. It is safe here. It is quiet, save for the rhythmic chirping of cicadas and the distant, comforting hoot of a colobus monkey. We are standing in the shadow of the Great Rift Valley, witnessing the world as it was when our story begins. But before we settle into the leaves and watch the dawn of humanity, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your city and local time in the comments so we can see where everyone is listening from. Now, let the silence return. Look closely through the ferns. There, resting in the crook of a massive mahogany tree, is a figure. It is an ancestor, a member of a species that will one day scream at traffic and write poetry. But right now, it is perfectly at peace, and it is covered, from the crown of its head to the tips of its toes, in thick, luxurious fur. This is the world of the thick coat, the standard operating system for nearly every primate on Earth. To us, looking back with our bare, sensitive skin, this creature might seem wild, but in reality, it is dressed in nature's finest technology. This fur is a miracle of biological engineering. It is not merely hair, it is a shield, a blanket, and a uniform all woven into one. The creature shifts in its sleep, and you can see how the coarse outer guard hairs catch the dappled light, shimmering with a dark russet hue. Underneath lies a softer, denser layer, a downy insulation that traps warm air against the skin. This dual-layer system is essential because, despite the tropical latitude, the African nights here can be surprisingly unforgiving. When the sun vanishes and the heat of the day bleeds into the stars, the temperature can plummet below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Without this built-in duvet, our ancestor would shiver violently, burning precious calories just to stay alive until morning. But with it, they sleep soundly, wrapped in a warmth that costs them nothing. It creates a cozy microclimate, a tiny bubble of tropical air that travels with them wherever they go. It is a comforting thought, isn't it? To never be truly naked, to always carry your home's warmth directly on your back. Historians and evolutionary biologists still pause at this divergence, marveling at the sheer utility we eventually abandoned. Charles Darwin himself, the father of evolutionary theory, famously found human hairlessness to be a profound puzzle, noting that no other primate had stripped itself so completely of its birthright. And it truly was a birthright. For millions of years, this coat has protected your lineage not just from the cold, but from the myriad hostilities of the wild. Think of the thorns in the thicket, the jagged edges of rocks, the biting jaws of soldier ants. Against bare skin, a walk through the undergrowth is a gauntlet of scratches and welts. But against this thick pelt, thorns snap, and insects are baffled, wandering through the forest of hair without ever finding the skin. It is armor, light and flexible, self-repairing and constantly renewing. There is no need for a tailor here. Nature fits the suit perfectly from birth, but the coat serves a purpose even deeper than protection. Watch now, as another figure approaches the sleeping one. It is a quiet, intimate moment. They sit together on the thick branch, and the grooming begins. This is the heartbeat of their society. Long, dark fingers move rhythmically through the deep fur, parting the hairs, searching for debris, dry skin, or ticks. It is a hypnotic, repetitive motion, part, pick, smooth, part, pick, smooth. The sensation is profoundly soothing, releasing a cascade of endorphins and oxytocin in both the giver and the receiver. In a world without language, where no one can say, "I love you," or "I forgive you," or "we are friends," the fur provides the medium for communication. It is a canvas of touch. By grooming the coat of another, you are weaving a social bond stronger than steel. You are saying, "I care for your well-being, and I trust you with my back." If we were to lose this fur, we would lose the very mechanism of our social glue. How would we bond? How would we apologize? It seems impossible to imagine a world without it. To these ancestors, their fur is as much a part of them as their hands or their eyes. It defines their silhouette against the setting sun. It signals their health. A glossy, thick coat attracts mates, while a patchy one warns of sickness. It is their identity. And yet, there is a tension in the air, a subtle shift that perhaps only the trees have noticed. The climate is changing. The earth is wobbling on its axis, and the reliable rains that have kept this forest lush for eons are beginning to falter. The deep, eternal green is starting to fray at the edges. Slowly, imperceptibly, the trees are stepping back, creating gaps where the golden, brutal light of the sun strikes the ground with a new intensity. Our ancestors do not know it yet, but they are living in the final golden age of the coat. They are perfectly adapted to a world that is quietly vanishing beneath their feet. The fur that cradles them now, that keeps them warm in the cool canopy, is about to become a liability. But for tonight, the forest is still a womb. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange, and the temperature drops. The ancestor curls into a tight ball, tucking their nose into the thick fur of their chest, wrapping their long tail around themselves like a scarf. They are warm. They are safe. They are oblivious to the fact that they are the last of their kind to sleep so soundly, wrapped in the comfort of a coat they did not have to make. The darkness settles, heavy and sweet, and the symphony of the night begins, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of nocturnal civets, the breathing of the forest itself. It feels permanent, this furry existence. It feels like it will last forever. But time is a river that flows only one way, and the current is picking up speed. We drift here in the peace of the ancient past, watching the steady rise and fall of a furry chest, knowing that the dawn brings not just a new day, but a new world, a world of heat, a world of exposure, a world where the safety of the trees is a memory, and the open ground awaits. Sleep now, ancient one, in the embrace of your natural blanket. Enjoy the warmth while it lasts, for the trees are thinning, and the sky is opening up, wide and terrifyingly bright. The world changes not with a shout, but with a whisper, a dry, rasping whisper of wind moving through grass where no grass had grown before. As we float forward in time, speeding up the clock of the cosmos, the lush, unbroken emerald ocean of the forest begins to retreat. It is a slow-motion receding tide, pulling back over tens of thousands of years, leaving behind something new, something alien and gold: the savanna. This is not a sudden apocalypse, but a gradual, silent crisis. The great geological engine of the earth is churning beneath the surface. The tectonic plates grind together, forcing the crust upward to form the mountains of the Great Rift Valley. These new, jagged peaks act as a wall, a massive stone shoulder turned against the wind, blocking the moisture-laden clouds drifting in from the ocean. The rain, once a daily benediction, becomes fickle, then scarce. The air grows thirsty. The scent of the world shifts from the damp, fungal sweetness of rotting wood to the sharp, dusty tang of silica and sun-baked earth. Watch the landscape transform beneath us. The mighty mahogany trees, the pillars of our ancestors' existence, begin to stand further and further apart, like old friends drifting away from one another at a crowded party. The canopy, which had been a continuous highway allowing a primate to travel from coast to coast without ever touching the dirt, begins to tear. Great holes of blue sky open up above, letting in shafts of light that strike the forest floor with the intensity of a laser. In these sun-drenched patches, the ferns die back, unable to bear the heat, and in their place rises the grass, tough, fibrous, razor-edged grass that hisses when the wind blows. For the creatures living in the branches, this is a time of profound confusion. Imagine an ancestor, a being perfectly designed for an arboreal life, staring out from the safety of a fig tree. To the north, the next grove of fruit trees is visible, a green island shimmering in the heat haze. But between here and there lies a terrifying expanse of open ground. To us, it might look like a park. To them, it is a kill zone. The ground is where the leopards prowl. The ground is where the saber-toothed cats with jaws like guillotines lie in the tall grass, invisible and patient. The ground is where you go to die. And yet, hunger is a cruel master. As the forests shrink, the fruit becomes scarcer. The easy days of reaching out a hand to pluck a breakfast are ending. Now, to eat, one must move. We can see the hesitation in their posture, the way they grip the bark until their knuckles turn white under their fur. There is a hesitant swaying motion as they gauge the distance, realizing they cannot jump it. There is no choice. With a reluctance that echoes across the millennia, the ancestor descends. The first steps are awkward, a clumsy waddling shuffle. It is almost comical to watch, like a sailor trying to walk on dry land after years at sea, or perhaps a toddler in a snowsuit trying to navigate a balance beam. They are not graceful striders yet. They are tree-dwellers forced into a pedestrian commute. They scurry across the open gap, knuckles grazing the hot dust, eyes darting frantically for the flash of a predator's coat. When they reach the safety of the next tree, they scramble up with frantic speed, hearts hammering against their ribs, panting in the safety of the leaves. But notice that panting. It is deeper, more desperate than before. This is the first warning sign of the trap they are walking into. The fur, that magnificent life-saving duvet we admired in the deep forest, is beginning to turn against them. In the cool shade of the dense canopy, the coat was perfect. But out here, in the mosaic environment, a patchwork of woods and grasslands that paleoanthropologists identify as the crucible of human evolution, the sun is a relentless hammer. The moment they step out of the shade, the solar radiation strikes their dark fur, and the heat is trapped instantly against the skin. They are wearing a winter coat in a sauna. The very insulation that keeps them alive at night is threatening to cook them alive during the day. The sun is no longer just a source of light, it is a physical weight pressing down on their shoulders. We can see them pausing more often in the shade, lethargic, mouths gaping open to cool down, looking for all the world like tourists who underestimated the weather in Florida. It is a biological mismatch of tragic proportions. Their bodies are built for a world that is vanishing, and they are struggling to survive in the world that is arriving. Yet, this pressure is exactly what is needed. Evolution is a sculptor that only works with the chisel of adversity. If the forest had stayed lush and cool, we would still be there, happily picking fleas off each other in the shade, perhaps wondering if there was anything good on the other side of the mountain, but never bothering to check. The shrinking forest forced us to become travelers. It forced us to stand up just a little bit straighter to see over the tall grass. It forced us to leave the womb. There is a scholarly debate that murmurs in the background of this scene. A conversation among experts about exactly how much time our ancestors spent in the water versus the savanna. But the consensus holds that this drying, this opening of the continent, was the primary engine of change. The heat was the key. As the gaps between the trees grew wider, the journeys became longer. A 50-yard dash became a mile-long trek, and with every mile, the thermal penalty of the fur became more severe. Watch as a small band of these early hominins traverses a particularly wide stretch of savanna. They are upright now, mostly, though they still have the curved fingers of tree climbers. They are moving at noon, the time when the predators are usually asleep, hoping to avoid being eaten. But the sun is at its zenith, the air shimmers. You can almost feel the heat radiating off the ground, baking the soles of their feet. They are sweltering. Their thick coats are matted with sweat that cannot evaporate because the hair holds the moisture tight against the skin, creating a hot, soggy layer that only makes things worse. They are overheating, their internal temperatures creeping toward the danger zone where enzymes denature and the brain begins to shut down. They have to stop. They huddle under a solitary acacia tree, gasping, exhausted not by the distance but by their own biology. It is a precarious existence balanced on a knife edge of temperature. They are prisoners of their own protection, but nature, in its infinite creativity, is already testing a solution, a subtle mutation here, a slight variation there. The story of our skin is about to take a dramatic turn. As the sun beats down on that lonely acacia tree, casting a small dark pool of shade in an ocean of light, we are witnessing the end of an era. The fur has served us well for millions of years. It kept us warm through the ice ages of the past. It protected us from the biting ants and the scraping thorns. But the lease on this particular survival strategy is up. The landlord, the climate, is changing the terms of the agreement. To conquer the open plains, to become the masters of this new golden world, something drastic has to happen. We have to shed the past quite literally. The wind picks up again, rattling the dry seed pods of the acacia, sounding like a shaker in a band. It blows through the thick fur of the panting hominins, offering no relief. The heat is a silent predator, more dangerous in the long run than any leopard. And so, the stage is set for the greatest striptease in history. The forest is gone. The roof has been torn off the world. We are exposed. And in that exposure, in that desperate need to cool down, lies the seed of the future. The ancestors close their eyes against the glare, waiting for the cool of the evening, unaware that their children's children will walk through this fire, not with heavy coats, but with skins smooth as polished stone, sweating like fountains, running toward a destiny that is naked, vulnerable, and unstoppable. The sun climbs higher, a relentless, blinding disk of white gold that seems to halt the very passage of time, pinning the world beneath a heavy, shimmering blanket of silence. It is high noon on the Pliocene savanna, the 0 hour of the prehistoric day. If you listen closely, past the hum of the insects, you will hear nothing. The birds have ceased their singing, retreating into the deepest shadows of the acacia thorns. The lions, those tawny kings of the grass, are sprawled flat on their sides in the shade of copiers, panting softly, their bellies rising and falling in a rhythmic stupor. Even the wind seems to have collapsed from exhaustion. In this breathless oven, we find our ancestors, and they are in trouble. They are huddled in the fragmentary shade of a single scraggly tree, pressing their bodies against the slightly cooler earth, trying to make themselves small, trying to disappear from the gaze of the sun. This is the lethal heat trap. To understand the severity of their predicament, imagine putting on your heaviest winter coat, the one with the down filling and the thick fuzzy hood, and zipping it up all the way to your chin. Now, imagine putting on thermal pants and wool socks. Now, step out into the middle of a desert where the air temperature is touching 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Within minutes, you would feel uncomfortable. Within an hour, you would be in distress. But our ancestors cannot simply unzip. They are locked inside their own biology, trapped in a suit of armor that was designed for a different war. The physics of their situation is brutal and unforgiving. Fur is a magnificent insulator. Its job is to trap a layer of air against the skin to prevent heat loss. In the forest, or at night, this is a lifesaver. But here, under the direct assault of solar radiation, it works too well. It traps the body's own metabolic heat, the fire generated by simply being alive, and holds it tight against the skin. At the same time, the dark tips of the hairs absorb the solar energy, turning the outer layer of the coat into a scorching surface that can reach temperatures far higher than the air itself. They are essentially wrapped in a solar-powered heating blanket that they cannot turn off. This creates a terrifying physiological ceiling. Every step they take generates more internal heat. Every muscle twitch, every heartbeat adds fuel to the internal fire. If they try to run or even walk briskly to scavenge a carcass or reach a waterhole, their core body temperature spikes. The mammalian body is a delicate chemical engine. It operates within a very narrow thermal window. If the core temperature rises just a few degrees, from 98.6 degrees Celsius to, say, 104 degrees Celsius, the proteins that make up the cells begin to unravel. It is a biological meltdown. The brain, the most temperature-sensitive organ of all, begins to cook. We can imagine one of the younger males, driven by hunger, or perhaps just the restlessness of youth, trying to defy this thermal law. He steps out of the shade, squinting against the glare. He spots a potential meal, a gazelle fawn left hidden in the grass, perhaps half a mile away. He starts to jog. For the first minute, he is fine. But then, the trap snaps shut. His muscles generate heat, but the thick fur prevents that heat from escaping. He begins to pant, his tongue lolling out, trying to exchange hot air for cool, but the air he breathes in is already hot, and panting is a clumsy, inefficient way to cool a large body. It works for a dog lying still, but it is terrible for a biped in motion. The heat builds up in his chest, in his skull. His vision begins to swim, the horizon tilting crazily. A pounding headache, like a rhythmic drum, starts behind his eyes. He feels nauseous, dizzy, his limbs turning to lead. This is the onset of heat stroke, the silent killer of the savanna. He stumbles, abandoning the hunt, and crawls back to the shade, collapsing with his chest heaving, defeated not by a predator, but by his own coat. It is a cruel irony. The very adaptation that allowed mammals to conquer the cold regions of the earth is now the chain that binds them to the shade. They are prisoners of the twilight, forced to be crepuscular, active only in the cool of dawn and dusk. But the middle of the day, that vast, dangerous stretch of 6 or 8 hours, is a wasted resource. It is a time when the world is bright and clear, when scavengers could spot kills from miles away, when predators are too sleepy to hunt them. The noon hour is a treasure chest of calories waiting to be opened, but the heat is the lock, and they do not have the key. Historians and paleoanthropologists argue that this thermal constraint was the primary bottleneck of our evolution during this period. The pressure was immense. It wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival. A species that spends half its day paralyzed by heat is a species that is starving. They are losing opportunities. They are losing the evolutionary race. And let's be honest, there is a certain grim humor in it, imagining our great-great-great-grandparents looking essentially like frustrated, overheating gorillas sitting under a tree looking at a perfectly good antelope carcass a mile away and thinking, I would go get that, but I'm just not dressed for the occasion. It is the ultimate wardrobe malfunction, but the body is listening. Biology is rarely static when death is on the line. Deep within the genetic code, dormant switches are waiting to be flipped. The body is desperate to dump this excess heat. It tries to sweat, but in the current configuration, sweat is useless. The thick fur mats down, trapping the moisture, creating a hot, humid layer that fosters fungus and rash rather than cooling the skin. It's like wearing a wet wool sweater, unpleasant and ineffective. The sweat needs air. It needs a breeze. It needs surface area. The conflict between the need to move and the need to stay cool is reaching a breaking point. Something has to give. The fur, once the proud mantle of the primate order, the cozy comforter of the forest nights, has become a suffocating death shroud. And so, the great evolutionary shears are lifted. The selection pressure begins to favor those individuals with slightly thinner coats, slightly patchier fur, slightly more exposed skin. It is not a conscious choice. No one woke up and decided to shave, but a brutal game of statistics. The individuals who are just a little bit neuter can run a little bit further, hunt a little bit longer, and gather just a few more calories before the heat hammer drops. They survive, they breed, they pass on their thinner coat genes. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the tide of fur begins to recede. But for now, in the sweltering heat of Section 3, we leave them panting in the shade, hearts pounding against ribs cage that feels too small, staring out at the shimmering heat haze, waiting for a miracle that is written in their own skin, waiting for the cooling revolution that will change the face of the planet. And then, the lock clicks open. In the deep silent workshops of evolution, where the currency is survival and the deadline is eternity, a solution is engineered, a biological breakthrough so radical it will separate us from every other mammal on the planet. It is the cooling revolution. It begins not with a roar, but with a drop. A single, clear, salty drop of water appearing on the brow of an ancestor. The body, pushed to the brink of thermal failure by the relentless savanna sun, discovers a new way to breathe, not with lungs, but with skin. We are witnessing the rise of the eccrine sweat gland. Now, most mammals, including our furry cousins back in the forest, have sweat glands, but they are different. They are called apocrine glands, located deep near the hair follicles. They produce a thick, oily, milky substance, a chemical cocktail used primarily for scent signaling, for marking territory, for saying, "I am here." It is a social sweat, not a cooling one. But as the fur begins to thin, retreating like a tide going out for the last time, a different type of gland begins to multiply across the human canvas. These are the eccrine glands. They are tiny, coiled tubes, microscopic plumbing systems that bypass the hair entirely and open directly onto the surface of the skin. And they are prolific. Over thousands of generations, their numbers explode, colonizing the chest, the back, the forehead, the palms, until the human body is studded with between 2 and 5 million of these tiny biological sprinklers. This is a staggering density, a hydroengineering marvel that turns the human skin into the most efficient cooling surface in the natural world. It is a transformation of alchemy. We turn our internal water into external armor. The physics of this system is elegantly simple and devastatingly effective. When that clear, watery fluid is pumped onto the surface of the bare skin, it encounters the hot, dry air of the savanna. As the water evaporates, turning from liquid to vapor, it requires energy to make that phase jump. It steals that energy in the form of heat directly from the skin. It is a heat pump. It literally pulls the fire out of the blood and casts it into the wind. But this magic trick comes with a strict condition. The skin must be bare. If the thick coat of the past remained, the sweat would simply soak the fur, creating a hot, wet, matted mess that blocks the air and traps the heat even more effectively, a phenomenon anyone who has worn a wool sweater in a rainstorm understands all too well. So, the fur has to go. It is a necessary sacrifice. We trade the passive protection of the coat for the active management of the sweat. Visualize this change rippling through time. The coarse guard hairs fall away. The dense underwool vanishes. The skin, once a hidden landscape known only to fleas and lovers, is revealed to the world. It is a vulnerable moment. Without the fur, we are exposed to scrapes, to sun, to the teeth of insects. But, oh, the relief. Imagine that same ancestor from the previous section, the one huddled under the acacia tree, heat-struck and dizzy. Now, equip him with this new naked skin and these millions of glands. He steps out into the blazing noon sun. The heat strikes him, yes, but almost instantly his skin begins to glisten. He becomes a shimmering statue of bronze and water. A breeze, hot and dry, sweeps across the savanna. To a furry creature, this wind is just moving hot air. But to the naked, sweating human, that breeze feels like ice. It chills the moisture on his skin, sending a shiver of relief deep into his core. It is the first time a primate has ever felt the true, refreshing power of a wind chill. This is the moment we became the wet primates. We are leaky creatures, walking humidifiers. It is a bit humorous when you think about it. We are the only animals that have to worry about staining our shirts or wiping our brows, the only creatures who leave salty puddles on the gym floor. We are designed to leak, but this leakiness is our superpower. Consider the alternative: panting. A cheetah, the fastest animal on land, cools itself by panting, moving air rapidly over the moist surfaces of the tongue and lungs. But panting has a fatal flaw. It is mechanically tied to breathing. You cannot pant effectively while you are galloping. The rhythm of the lungs is locked to the rhythm of the legs. This means a furry predator can sprint, generating massive heat, But then it must stop. It must collapse and pant to dump that heat. It is a burst in weight system. We, however, have decoupled cooling from breathing. We can sweat while we walk, sweat while we run, sweat while we talk. Our radiator's on the outside, completely independent of our engine. This means our endurance is theoretically limitless, bounded only by the water we can drink. We are water-cooled engines in a world of air-cooled machines. Scientific analysis confirms that a human can sweat up to 12 liters of water in a single day, a torrential outpouring that allows us to maintain a stable core temperature of 98.6 degrees, even when the air temperature soars past 100 degrees Celsius. We carry our own personal climate with us, not by trapping heat like the fur did, but by shedding it. This transition was the biological unlocking of the African continent. Suddenly, the heat trap of the midday sun is no longer a prison, it is a fortress. The lions are asleep, the hyenas are panting in their dens, the world is empty. And into this emptiness steps the naked ape, dripping wet, smelling faintly of salt and dust, smiling because he feels cool. The heat is no longer a wall, it is a weapon he can use against others. He can walk through the inferno while others must hide. This cooling revolution does more than just let us walk. It reshapes our relationship with water. We become tethered to the waterholes in a new way. We become thirsty animals, drinking far more frequently than our primate cousins because our cooling system consumes our body's hydration reserves. We trade water for distance. It's a fair trade. As the camera of our history pans across this glistening naked skin, we see the potential building. The brain, safe now behind a radiator that keeps it from cooking, begins to hum with new possibilities. The legs, free to move without overheating, begin to twitch with the urge to run. The fur is gone, lost to the wind and time, leaving behind a creature that looks fragile, pink and soft, but is, in reality, the most thermally resilient mammal on the plains. We have stripped down to gear up. The sun beats down, shimmering off the wet shoulders of the first true humans, and for the first time in history, the heat does not command them to stop. It whispers instead a dangerous and thrilling invitation. Run. And run we shall. For the cooling system is just the engine. Now we need to see what this engine can do. The static survival of the shade is over. The dynamic, sweating, relentless pursuit is about to begin. The chase begins not with a sprint, but with a trot, a rhythmic, shuffling gait that looks almost pathetic against the backdrop of the vast, deadly savanna. If you were watching from a ridge, observing this drama unfold through the shimmering heat haze of midday, you would place your bets entirely on the prey. It is a greater kudu, a magnificent bull with spiraling horns that corkscrew toward the sky, muscles coiling like steel cables beneath a coat of tawny fur. He is built for speed, for explosive power, for the sudden desperate dash that leaves lions clawing at dust. The predator trailing him is underwhelming. It is our ancestor, naked, upright, hairless, holding perhaps a simple sharpened stick or a rock. He is slow. He is soft. In a 100-yard dash, the kudu would leave him standing still, vanishing into the brush before the human had even taken 10 strides. But this is not a 100-yard dash. This is a new kind of warfare, a battle not of speed, but of thermodynamics. It is the birth of the persistence hunt. The kudu spots the human and bolts, tearing across the plains at 40 miles per hour. The human does not accelerate. He simply keeps jogging. A steady, relentless plod. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of his feet on the hard-packed earth is the ticking of a doomsday clock. The kudu runs until it is safe, perhaps half a mile away, and then it stops. It turns to look back, its sides heaving. And this is where the biological trap springs. The kudu, like most quadrupeds, is bound by a physiological shackle. Its breathing is tied to its stride. When it runs, its guts slam back and forth like a piston, forcing air in and out of the lungs. It cannot pant while it gallops. To cool down, to dump the massive heat generated by that sprint, it must stand still and breathe rapidly. But the human does not let it rest. Just as the kudu's breathing begins to slow, just as its core temperature begins to dip away from the danger zone, the figure appears again through the heat waves. Jogging, always jogging. The kudu panics. It sprints again, another burst of terrifying speed. The gap widens. The human is left behind in a cloud of dust. But the human does not stop. He tracks the hoofprints in the dirt. He reads the broken stems of grass. He cuts the corner, jogging in a straight line while the animal zigs and zags. He is water-cooled, sweat streaming down his bare back, evaporating in the dry wind, keeping his brain cool and his focus razor-sharp. The kudu is not so lucky. It is wearing a fur coat in the middle of the day. The heat from the first sprint is still trapped in its body, and now the heat from the second sprint is piling on top of it. Its internal thermometer is climbing, 102 degrees, 104 degrees, 106 degrees. The animal is literally cooking from the inside out. There is a profound, almost philosophical terror in this strategy. It is the origin of the monster in our horror movies, the creature that cannot be outrun because it never stops, the slow, shambling thing that is always there when you turn around. For the antelope, the human is the Terminator. It is a contest of endurance that feels incredibly modern. We are the only species that essentially exercises our food to death. There is a touch of dark humor in the image of early man, the world's first marathon runner, jogging after his dinner with the dogged persistence of a mail carrier while the rest of the animal kingdom looks on in confusion. Why doesn't he just give up? The cheetah might wonder. He's so slow. But the human knows something the cheetah doesn't. He knows that the sun is his weapon. He looks up at the blinding white disk in the sky and smiles, because the hotter it gets, the sooner the kudu will fall. This dance continues for hours. 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours. The kudu's runs become shorter. Its head hangs low. Its tongue lolls out, dripping foam, desperate to cool the blood rushing to its overheating brain. The human is tired, yes. His legs burn, his throat is parched, but his temperature is stable. He drinks from an ostrich egg filled with water, carried in a woven sling, refilling his radiator while the kudu dehydrates. Scholarly debate still circles this hypothesis, with some paleoanthropologists questioning just how frequent persistence hunting was compared to ambush scavenging, arguing that it consumes a dangerous amount of energy with no guarantee of success. Yet, the anatomy of our legs, the springy arch of the foot, the massive gluteus maximus, our butt muscles, the nuchal ligament in the neck that keeps our head steady while running, all scream that we were built for this. We are built to run forever. And finally, the end comes. It is quiet. There is no snarling, no pouncing, no clash of claws. The kudu simply stops. It finds the shade of a small bush and collapses, its legs refusing to lift another inch. Its body has hit the thermal ceiling. To run again would mean death by heat stroke. It looks up with wide, dark eyes as the human approaches. The predator is not winded. He's not panting. He stands over the magnificent beast, his chest heaving rhythmically, his skin slick and glistening, a statue of endurance. He places a hand on the animal's flank, feeling the furnace heat radiating through the fur, the heat that killed it. In this moment, the human is not just a participant in the food chain. He has transcended it. He has used his nakedness to turn the sun into a spear. He has used his weakness, the lack of claws, fangs, or speed, to develop a strength that no other animal possesses. He has outlasted the wild. The kill that follows is almost an afterthought, a necessary tragedy to fuel the engine of the tribe. As the sun begins to dip lower, casting long, bruised shadows across the savanna, the runner sits beside his prize. He is exhausted, but he is fed. He has proven that naked skin is not a vulnerability. It is a high-performance cooling system that allows for a dominance over the daylight hours that was previously impossible. The fur is gone, and in its place is the sweat of the hunter. The silence of the afternoon returns, but it is different now. It is the silence of a world that has been conquered by patience. The human shoulders the weight of the meat, the protein that will grow his children's brains, and begins the long walk home, the first long-distance traveler on a planet that will one day be spanned by his roads. But as he walks, the sun continues its descent, and the very air begins to change, hinting at a new problem that his naked skin has not yet solved. The light is fading. And with the light, the danger of the invisible rays remains. As the adrenaline of the hunt fades and the successful runner returns to the tribe, dragging the prize of the kudu through the tall grass, we must pause to look closely, microscopically closely, at the hero of our story, the skin itself. In our imagination, we often picture these early humans as having always possessed the rich, deep complexions associated with modern equatorial Africa. But the genetic time machine tells a different, more complicated story. When the fur first fell away, exposing the canvas of the body to the open air, the skin underneath was likely pale, pinkish, freckled, similar to the skin you see if you shave a chimpanzee today. For millions of years, the fur had blocked the sun so effectively that the skin had no need for its own protection. But now, the coat is gone. The umbrella has been folded up and thrown away, and the naked ape is walking under a sun that is essentially a fusion reactor hanging in the sky, blasting the surface of the Earth with high-energy ultraviolet radiation. This leads to the era of the burning. Imagine the sensation of that first deep blistering sunburn, a pain that radiates not just heat, but a deep cellular alarm. Without the fur, and without yet having developed protection, the pale skin of our ancestors was under siege. It wasn't just about the pain of a burn, though anyone who has fallen asleep on a beach knows that is bad enough to ruin your week. The danger was silent and far more insidious. The UV rays were penetrating deep into the dermal layers and smashing through the delicate chemical bonds of the blood. Specifically, they were destroying a crucial nutrient called folate, or vitamin B9. Folate is the fuel of reproduction. It is essential for the development of healthy fetuses and the production of sperm. The sun was literally sterilizing the pale-skinned hunters, bleaching the future out of their bloodstreams. It was a crisis of existence. If they could not survive the light, the advantage of sweating would mean nothing, because there would be no next generation to inherit it. Nature, however, does not provide aloe vera. It provides adaptation. And so, the great paintbrush of evolution was dipped into the pot of melanin. This is one of the most elegant and visually striking chapters in our biological history, the invention of the shield of melanin. Melanin is a complex polymer, a biological pigment that acts as a miniature chemical parasol. When produced by special cells called melanocytes, it forms a cap over the nucleus of the skin cells, absorbing the harmful UV radiation and dissipating it harmlessly as heat. It is the body's own sunscreen, but unlike the lotions we buy today, it doesn't wash off in the ocean. It is woven into the very fabric of our being. Over thousands of years, a powerful selective sweep occurred. Individuals with darker, richer, more melanin-saturated skin retained their folate levels. They had healthier babies. They survived the solar bombardment. Those with paler skin did not. The genetic record, written in the MC1R gene, confirms this timeline with remarkable precision. Scientists estimate that this gene, which controls pigmentation, became fixed in its dark variant form roughly 1.2 million years ago. This is a crucial historical truth that anchors our narrative. The darkness of human skin was a direct, necessary response to the loss of our fur. It was not a cosmetic choice, nor was it an original setting. It was a suit of armor forged in the fires of the African sun. We became black because we became naked. The transformation must have been beautiful to watch over the eons, a slow deepening of the collective complexion, turning from the vulnerable pink of the forest dweller to the deep, lustrous ebony, mahogany, and bronze of the savanna master. This dark skin was a triumph of engineering, allowing our ancestors to stand tall in the midday glare without fear, their bodies protected by a living shield that drank the light and kept the blood safe. There is a scholarly debate that often arises here, creating a fascinating tension in the narrative of skin. For decades, it was assumed that dark skin evolved primarily to prevent skin cancer. It makes intuitive sense. Sun causes cancer. Melanin blocks sun, therefore melanin prevents cancer. However, evolutionary biologists have pointed out a flaw in this logic. Skin cancer usually strikes later in life, often after an individual has already reproduced. In the brutal calculus of evolution, nature doesn't particularly care what happens to you after you've passed on your genes. This led to the folate hypothesis, which argues that the protection of birth, not the delay of death, was the true driver. Yet, historians and scientists still argue whether there were other factors at play, perhaps the barrier function of skin, or protection of sweat glands, or even camouflage in the dappled shadows. It is a reminder that evolution rarely does just one thing at a time. It is a multitasker. But regardless of the exact ratio of reasons, the result was a humanity that was, for a long stretch of history, universally dark-skinned. We were a species of midnight and bronze. This uniformity lasted for hundreds of thousands of years. It was only much later, when humans wandered out of Africa and into the gray, cloudy north of Europe and Asia, that the shield became a liability. In those sun-starved lands, the dark skin blocked too much light, preventing the skin from making vitamin D, leading to rickets and bone deformities. So the skin paled again, fading like a curtain left in the sun, stripping away the pigment to drink in the meager light. It is a poetic irony. We lost our fur to cool down, gained dark skin to survive the sun, and then lost the dark skin to survive the clouds. We are a canvas that the environment paints and repaints to match the sky. But let us return to the savannah, to the time of the shield. With their sweat glands firing and their melanin armor in place, our ancestors are now fully equipped for the open world. They are the ultimate daywalkers. They look different now, strikingly human. If you saw one of them silhouetted against the setting sun with their smooth, dark skin and upright posture, you would recognize them immediately as kin. They are no longer ape-like. They are us, just stripped down to the essentials. This new skin also brings a new kind of sensory experience. Without the buffer of fur, the world feels sharper. The brush of tall grass against the thigh, the grit of dust on the shoulder, the soothing caress of a breeze. These sensations are transmitted directly to the brain with a startling immediacy. The skin becomes a boundary, a definite line where me ends and the world begins. It creates a heightened sense of physical presence, and it requires care. We can imagine the early rituals of skin maintenance, perhaps the first uses of mud as a secondary block, or animal fats rubbed into dry patches, the beginning of a grooming culture that has obsessed us ever since. It is mildly amusing to think that the prehistoric bathroom cabinet was essentially a mud puddle and a handful of grease, but the principle is the same. The naked skin is needy. It demands attention. It burns, it itches, it dries out. We gave up the low-maintenance life of the fur coat for the high-maintenance life of the naked ape, forever destined to worry about moisturizers. As the sun finally touches the horizon, painting the sky in violent streaks of violet and blood orange, the dark skin of our ancestors blends perfectly with the gathering shadows. They have solved the problem of the heat. They have solved the problem of the radiation. They have become a fortress of biology, capable of enduring the harshest conditions the continent can throw at them. But this physiological stability, this ability to keep the body cool and the blood safe, unlocks one final massive door: the brain. That energy-hogging, heat-generating, fragile walnut of tissue inside the skull has been waiting for this moment. For millions of years, the brain was limited by the body's inability to cool it. It was stuck in a thermal bottleneck. But now, the radiator's working, the shield is up, the temperature is stable, the constraints are gone. And deep within the skull of the dark-skinned, sweating hunter, the neurons begin to fire with a new, expensive intensity. The engine is about to get a massive upgrade. The loss of fur did not just change how we look, it changed how we think. We are about to witness the rise of the most dangerous weapon of all, the supercharged mind, fed by a metabolism that no longer fears the heat. The sun sets, the stars wheel overhead, and the naked skin shivers slightly in the dropping temperature, unaware that the mind it protects is plotting to conquer not just the savannah, but time itself. Deep inside the fortress of the skull, a silent revolution is burning. As we drift through the velvet darkness of the prehistoric night, hovering over the sleeping forms of our ancestors, we must shift our gaze from the surface to the center, from the skin to the mind. We have spent the last few sections admiring the external renovations, the loss of the coat, the plumbing of the sweat glands, the painting of the skin in rich melanin. But all of these changes were, in a sense, just preparations for the main event. They were the infrastructure upgrades necessary to support a new kind of resident, the high-performance human brain. This is the era where the engine gets too big for the car. To understand why losing our fur was so critical for thinking, we have to look at the brain not as a magical seat of the soul, but as a machine, a wet, biological machine that obeys the strict laws of thermodynamics. The brain is an incredibly demanding tenant. It represents only about 2% of your body weight, yet it greedily consumes 20% of your total energy intake. It is a furnace. Every thought you think, every memory you access, every dream you have generates heat. Neural activity is electrical, and like any electrical system, from a light bulb to a supercomputer, it runs hot. For a primate wrapped in a thick fur coat, this creates a dangerous ceiling. If the brain grows too large or works too hard, it generates more heat than the body can dump. The temperature rises, the delicate neurons begin to misfire, and the creature faces the risk of a seizure or heat stroke. It is a thermal deadlock. You cannot have a big, complex brain if you are wearing a parka in the tropics. This is why our furry cousins, intelligent as they are, hit a wall. They simply cannot afford the thermal cost of a larger mind. But the naked ape has broken the lock. With the fur gone and the sweat glands firing, the entire skin surface has become a radiator. This is the core of what anthropologists call the radiator theory, proposed by Dean Falk. It suggests that the cooling of the blood in the veins of the face and scalp, cooled by our sweat and the breeze on our bare skin, acts like a liquid cooling system for the brain. The blood travels up to the head, washes over the hot brain tissue, absorbs the heat, and then circulates back down to the skin to release it. It is a loop of elegance and efficiency. Because we can cool the blood, we can afford to heat up the mind. This thermal liberation allows for an explosion of growth. Around 2 million years ago, coinciding with the retreat of our fur, the cranial capacity of the genus Homo begins to skyrocket. It doubles, then triples. We move from the modest grapefruit-sized brains of Australopithecus to the massive complex football-sized brains of Homo erectus and eventually Homo sapiens. This growth is not just about size, it is about density, connectivity, and speed. We can run our engines hotter and faster than any other animal. Imagine the ancestor we watched hunting the kudu. As he sits by the fire now, digesting his meal, his brain is doing something extraordinary. It is planning. It is not just reacting to the snap of a twig or the scent of a lion, it is projecting into the future. It is simulating tomorrow. If I go to the river, the water might be high. If I go to the valley, the berries might be ripe. This ability to run mental simulations is metabolically expensive, a high-energy task that generates significant neural heat, but his naked skin keeps him cool enough to sustain the thought without overheating. He is the first philosopher of the plains, thinking not because he is magical, but because he is cool enough to afford it. There is a gentle irony here, a soft joke from the universe. We often think of intellectuals as being distinct from athletes, yet the very existence of our intellect relies entirely on our athletic cooling system. You cannot have the philosophy of Plato without the sweat glands of a marathon runner. They are two sides of the same biological coin. We are smart because we are sweaty. However, this massive brain is a hungry beast. It demands fuel constantly. It does not sleep when we sleep. It hums along, repairing memories, knitting together the day's events, keeping the autonomic systems online. This creates a new pressure. Our ancestors are now trapped on a treadmill of calories. They must hunt more, gather more, and eat higher quality food just to keep the lights on upstairs. The kudu hunt we witnessed wasn't just for sport. It was a necessity to fuel the furnace. This hunger drives innovation. It forces the brain to become even cleverer, inventing tools, strategies, and social structures to secure the energy it needs, which in turn allows the brain to grow larger, which in turn requires even more energy. It is a feedback loop of runaway complexity. We can see this complexity etching itself into the faces of the tribe. The brow ridges are still heavy, the jaws still powerful, but there is a new light in the eyes, a spark of recognition, of calculation. They are beginning to understand the mechanics of their world. They are remembering the migration patterns of birds, the seasonal shifts of the stars. The historical truth here is the correlation. The fossil record clearly shows that as the skeletal markers for heat dissipation appear, tall, thin bodies, nasal shapes for cooling air, the brain case expands. The shackles of temperature were struck off and the mind rushed to fill the void. But there is a vulnerability in this expansion. A large brain is fragile. It is soft, easily damaged, and incredibly sensitive to temperature fluctuations. The naked skin leaves the head exposed to the direct hammer of the sun. This is likely why, even as we lost the fur on our backs and chests, we kept the thick, dense thatch of hair on top of our heads. It is a permanent sun hat. Run your fingers through your own hair. Feel how it creates a buffer, a pocket of air between the burning sun and the precious overheating scalp. It is the only place the fur refused to retreat, a strategic reserve held by evolution to protect its most expensive investment. It is a cap of insulation for the computer. This retention of head hair is a silent nod to the preciousness of what lies beneath. The rest of the body was sacrificed to the elements, stripped bare to dump heat, but the crown was kept covered to shield the command center. As the night deepens and the temperature drops, the brain continues its work. It dreams. We do not know what early humans dreamed of, perhaps the endless running, perhaps the taste of marrow, perhaps the fear of the dark. But we know they dreamed with a complexity that was new to the planet. The cooling system allows for longer periods of REM sleep, for deeper consolidation of memory. The naked skin, sensing the chill, sends signals to the brain. Find warmth. And the brain, in its brilliance, solves the problem. It directs the hands to pile branches. It directs the breath to blow on a spark. It begins to manipulate the environment to suit the body, rather than waiting for the body to suit the environment. This is the turning point where biology hands the baton to technology. But before we get to the fire and the tools, there is another consequence of losing the fur, one less noble but equally transformative. We have spoken of heat and sun and brains, but we must also speak of the tiny, crawling, biting passengers that have plagued our lineage for eons. The coat was a home not just for us, but for millions of parasites. And when the landlord demolished the house, the tenants were furious. The great eviction is about to begin, and it will change how we choose our lovers, how we groom our friends, and how we define cleanliness forever. The brain may be expanding, but the skin is about to get a lot cleaner, and the story of our hygiene is just beginning to be written in the dust of the savannah. From the dizzying heights of the expanding mind, we must now lower our gaze to the microscopic landscape of the surface, zooming in until the skin becomes a continent and a single hair becomes a towering redwood. We have spoken of heat and sun and the grand evolutionary strategy of survival, but there is a smaller, itchier, and infinitely more personal driver of this transformation, the great parasite exodus. Close your eyes and imagine, just for a fleeting second, the sensation of a single, sudden itch between your shoulder blades, the kind you cannot reach, the kind that demands attention. Now, multiply that sensation by 1,000. For our furry ancestors, the thick coat was not just a blanket, it was a bustling metropolis for guests they never invited. The parasite hypothesis, a theory championed by evolutionary biologists like Sir Walter Bodmer and Mark Pagel, suggests that one of the primary reasons we stripped off our fur was simply to evict the tenants. A thick coat of fur is, biologically speaking, a paradise for ectoparasites. It provides everything a louse, tick, or flea could ever dream of. It is dark, it is humid, it is temperature controlled, and it offers infinite hiding spots to lay eggs and evade capture. In the deep fur of a primate, a tick can latch on and feed for days without ever being spotted. A louse can cling to the base of a hair shaft, protected from the wind and rain, sipping blood in total security. For millions of years, our ancestors carried a living, crawling tax on their biology. These parasites were not merely annoyances, they were deadly drains on the system. They drank the blood, spread debilitating fevers, and forced the immune system to work overtime, burning precious calories, fighting off infection instead of fueling the brain or the muscles. To be furry was to be infested. It was the standard condition of life in the wild. But as the savanna opened up and the pressure to cool down began to thin the coat, a catastrophic event occurred for the parasite population. The roof was ripped off their world. Watch the transformation from the perspective of a louse. For generations, your world has been a dense, shadowy forest of keratin. Suddenly, the trees begin to fall. The canopy thins. The blinding light of the sun penetrates all the way to the ground, the skin. The humidity drops. The wind howls through the widening gaps. The environment changes from a cozy, damp jungle to a dry, arid desert. The hiding places vanish. This is the great hygiene revolution of the Pliocene. By losing the fur, humanity inadvertently created a hostile environment for pests. On bare skin, a tick has nowhere to hide. It stands out like a boulder on a salt flat, easily seen and easily picked off. A louse has nothing to cling to as it traverses the vast, slippery plains of the shoulder or the back. The sheer exposure acts as a natural fumigation system. The parasites that relied on the cover of darkness and depth were decimated. This cleansing brought an immediate and profound physiological relief. Imagine the lifting of that constant low-level inflammation, the cessation of the eternal itch. The energy that the body once spent replacing lost blood and fighting tick-borne pathogens could now be redirected. It flowed into growth, into repair, and, crucially, into that hungry, expensive brain we just discussed. A clean body is a more efficient engine. However, nature is a stubborn author who rarely deletes a character entirely. She simply rewrites their role. The story of our parasites offers one of the most fascinating historical truths hidden in our own DNA, or rather in the DNA of the bugs that stuck around. Scientists have used the molecular clock of lice to date our history with startling precision. Here's the curious case of the two lice. Humans are unique among primates in that we host two completely different species of lice, the head louse and the pubic louse, often called the crab louse. The head louse is an ancient companion, descending directly from the lice that lived on our chimp-like ancestors 6 million years ago. They stayed on the island of the scalp, as the ocean of bare skin rose around them. But the pubic louse is different. Genetic analysis reveals that it is not related to the chimp louse, but to the louse found on gorillas. This leads to a somewhat awkward scholarly debate and a bit of soft humor among geneticists. How exactly did a gorilla louse jump to a human? The prevailing theory is that around 3.3 million years ago, our ancestors may have slept in the abandoned nests of early gorillas or scavenged on their kill, allowing the parasite to hop species. But here's the key. The fact that the head louse and the pubic louse never met, that they remained distinct species separated by the vast hairless desert of the human torso, proves that by 3.3 million years ago, our body hair was already gone. The naked skin was the barrier that kept them apart. We were already the naked apes, long before we were modern humans. The lice tell the story of our nudity better than any fossil ever could. They are the tiny, unwanted historians clinging to the wreckage of the fur coat. This reduction in parasite load did not just make us healthier, it changed the way we interacted. In the old furry world, grooming was a full-time job. You had to spend hours picking through your neighbor's coat, not just for social bonding, but to literally save them from being eaten alive by bugs. It was a hygiene necessity. But as the fur vanished and the parasites retreated to the few remaining strongholds, the head, the groin, the armpits, the urgency of grooming shifted. The heavy labor of delousing was replaced by something softer, lighter. The touch became less about extraction and more about sensation. We began to stroke skin rather than pick fur. The nerve endings in our hairless skin are incredibly sensitive to light touch. A caress that would have been lost in a thick pelt is felt like a thunderclap on bare skin. This evolution of touch helped to foster a new kind of intimacy, a gentleness that would become a hallmark of our species. We became creatures who touched for comfort, not just for cleaning. Of course, the parasites didn't give up entirely. They adapted, just as we did. The mosquito, the flying syringe of the tropics, found our new naked skin to be an all-you-can-eat buffet, unobstructed by fur. This new vulnerability to biting flies likely drove further adaptations, perhaps influencing our nomadic nature, moving camp to escape the swarms, or the development of the swatting reflex and the use of mud as an insect repellent. We traded the permanent residents, ticks and lice, for the transient raiders, mosquitoes and flies. But on the balance sheet of evolution, it was a massive win. The reduction in disease load was a game changer. It allowed populations to grow denser without instantly collapsing from plagues spread by close-contact parasites. It allowed us to sleep soundly without the creeping, crawling sensation of 1,000 tiny legs. As we drift away from this itchy chapter, envision the early human standing in the twilight, running a hand over a smooth, sweat-cooled arm. The skin is unbroken, clean, and healthy. The chaotic, dirty bustle of the fur coat is gone, replaced by a sleek, efficient surface. We are no longer walking hives, we are solitary fortresses. But this cleanliness brings a new pressure. In the animal kingdom, a clean coat is a signal. It says, I am healthy, I am strong, I have good genes. With the fur gone, the billboard has been stripped of its clutter. The message is now broadcast in high definition. The skin is no longer just a wrapper, it is a display. And as the eyes of the tribe turn toward one another in the gathering dusk, they are not just looking for lice anymore. They are looking for beauty. They are looking for the glow of health that only naked skin can reveal. The stage is set for the most ruthless and romantic judge of all, sexual selection. The parasites have been evicted, but the critics are just arriving, and they are looking for flaws. The naked truth is about to become very, very important. The sun has fully set now, and the world has shrunk to the circle of amber light cast by the flickering campfire. The vast, menacing savanna is hidden behind a wall of darkness, and the tribe gathers close, their bodies forming a perimeter of warmth against the chill of the night. It is here, in the intimacy of the firelight, that the next great chapter of our story unfolds, not a battle for survival against lions or heat, but a quiet, intense negotiation of desire. We have stripped the fur to cool the body and banished the parasites to clean the skin, but in doing so, we have inadvertently created the most sophisticated advertising display in the animal kingdom. We have turned our bodies into billboards. This is the era of the honest signal. To understand the gravity of this shift, we must look at the nature of beauty through the unromantic yet deeply compelling lens of evolutionary biology. In the animal world, beauty is rarely just about aesthetics. It is a resume. It is a dossier of genetic information presented for inspection. When a peacock fans his tail, he is not just saying, I am pretty. He's saying, I am so strong and healthy that I can afford to grow this ridiculous, heavy, useless ornament and still survive. It is a costly signal. But for our furry ancestors, the resume was often redacted. A thick coat of fur is an excellent concealer. It can hide a multitude of biological sins, a patchy rash, a festering wound, a tumor, or the pale, withered skin of malnutrition. A furry primate can look robust and fluffy on the outside while crumbling on the inside. It allows for a certain amount of bluffing in the mating game. But when the fur falls away, the bluff is called. The naked skin reveals everything. It is a ruthless truth-teller. Every blemish, every scar, Every yellowing hint of jaundice or pale patch of anemia is laid bare for the entire tribe to see. There is no hiding a skin infection when you are naked. There is no masking a fever when your skin is flushed and dry. Therefore, a prospective mate looking at a naked human is getting a direct, unfiltered read on the quality of that individual's immune system. If a person has smooth, glowing, unblemished skin in the harsh environment of the Pleistocene, it means something profound. It means they are resistant to parasites. It means their diet is rich. It means their genes are robust. They are a genetic jackpot. And so, a powerful new pressure begins to shape us. Sexual selection. Charles Darwin, who often fretted that his theory of natural selection couldn't explain everything, like the peacock's tail, proposed this second force, the idea that traits can evolve simply because the opposite sex finds them irresistible. In the case of humans, we began to find hairlessness sexy, not because we had a fashion magazine to tell us so, but because hairlessness was the window through which we could see the health of our partners. We began to prefer the smooth skin over the shaggy coat. We chose the mates who displayed their health most clearly. It's a bit funny to imagine the dating scene of the Stone Age. No dinner and a movie, just a long, intense stare at someone's elbows and back by the firelight to check for eczema. I really like him, one might think. His pores are so invisible. But this pickiness was a survival strategy. By choosing a mate with clear, hairless skin, our ancestors were statistically more likely to have healthy children who would survive to have their own healthy children. Over thousands of generations, this preference reinforced the hairless trait. We bred the fur off ourselves. We fell in love with the naked look, and in doing so, we locked it into our genome. This sexual dimorphism, the difference between the sexes, offers a clue to this dynamic. Even today, in almost every population on Earth, adult women tend to be naturally less hairy and slightly paler than adult men. Evolutionary biologists suggest this is because the selective pressure on females, the need to signal youth and fertility, was even more intense. The smooth, hairless skin became a hyper-feminine trait, a signal of high reproductive value that was selected for with ruthless efficiency. The skin became a canvas of attraction, a surface that demanded to be touched, admired, and protected. This shift also changed the sensory experience of affection. In the furry past, touch was about grooming, a functional, somewhat stiff interaction of fingers combing through wool. But on naked skin, touch becomes electric. The skin-to-skin contact releases floods of oxytocin, the bonding hormone. A caress on the bare arm, the resting of a head on a smooth shoulder, the intertwining of fingers. These are sensations that are muffled by fur but amplified by nakedness. The campfire light dances on the skin, creating highlights and shadows, emphasizing the curvature of the muscle and the bone. The aesthetic appreciation of the human form begins here. We became the only animals capable of seeing the blush of desire or the flush of excitement on a partner's chest. We became connoisseurs of the complexion. Historians and sociologists note that this biological baseline is why the glow of skin remains the central pillar of the multi-billion-dollar beauty industry today. We are still those early humans by the fire, desperately trying to signal to the world that we are healthy, that our genes are good, that we are worth mating with. We have just swapped the mud packs for serums and the firelight for ring lights. But there is a deeper layer to this honest billboard. It is not just about health, it is about vulnerability. To be naked is to be defenseless. When a human stands before another, stripped of their coat, they are offering a gesture of profound trust. Here I am, the skin says. I have no armor, I have no secrets. This vulnerability likely accelerated the emotional bonding between pairs. It forced a psychological intimacy to match the physical one. You cannot remain a stranger to someone who sees your scars. This nakedness bound parents together, creating the stable pair bonds necessary to raise those energy-hungry, big-brained babies we discussed in the last section. The naked love was the glue that held the family unit together in a world full of teeth and claws. It is a tender thought that our romance, our poetry, our love songs all have their roots in the simple biological fact that we lost our shirts and never found them again. As the embers of the fire glow red and the tribe begins to settle down for sleep, the skin continues to communicate. It radiates warmth to the bodies pressed against it. It senses the drop in temperature, and in the morning light, it will serve another purpose. For the skin is not just a wrapper for the body, it is the frame for the face. And as we moved away from the mask of fur, the human face was about to undergo a transformation as dramatic as the body. The hair retreated from the snout, the cheeks, the forehead, leaving behind a stage for the greatest actor in history, the facial muscle. We are done looking at the body as a sign of health. Now we must look at the face as a sign of the soul. The honest billboard is about to become a motion picture, capable of broadcasting thoughts without a single word being spoken. The era of the poker face is over. The era of the emote is beginning. As the first gray light of dawn creeps across the savannah, washing out the stars and waking the birds, we turn our gaze to the most intimate landscape of all, the human face. For millions of years, the face of our ancestors was a mysterious island surrounded by a sea of fur. It was a snout-heavy, guarded mask, framed by thick hair that obscured the forehead, the jawline, and the neck. In the animal kingdom, the face is often a static object, a fixed identity used primarily for eating and biting. But as the tide of fur receded from the human body, it also pulled back from the face, and in its wake, it revealed a canvas of extraordinary sensitivity. The loss of facial hair was not just a side effect of the general cooling trend. It was a specific, targeted evolution that turned our visage into a high-fidelity broadcasting system. We are the only animals who can communicate complex sentences without making a sound, simply by twitching a muscle above an eye or tightening the corner of a lip. This is the era where the face becomes a dynamic instrument of emotion. Underneath that newly naked skin lies a complex web of 43 distinct facial muscles, an intricate puppetry system that is unrivaled in nature. These muscles are not for chewing, they are for talking without words. Consider the eyebrow. In a furry primate, the brow is a heavy, bony ridge, often hidden by hair. In a human, the brow is a mobile semaphore, capable of conveying skepticism, surprise, anger, or sympathy in a fraction of a second. Because there is no fur to muffle the movement, even a millimeter of motion is visible. A slight crinkle of the eyes can distinguish a genuine smile, the famous Duchenne smile, from a polite fake one. We became masters of the micro-expression, learning to read the weather of each other's moods with the precision of meteorologists. This ability to broadcast and receive emotional data was crucial for a species that was beginning to live in tighter, more cooperative groups. We needed to know instantly if our neighbor was angry, fearful, or friendly. The naked face made the internal external. It dissolved the barrier between private thought and public knowledge. But the most striking innovation of this naked face is the eye itself. Look closely at the eyes of a chimpanzee or a gorilla. They are dark, with the iris filling almost the entire visible space or surrounded by dark brown sclera. Their gaze is camouflaged. It is difficult to tell exactly where an ape is looking, which is a tactical advantage in a competitive hierarchical world where staring can be seen as a threat. Now, look at a human eye. We are the only primates with a visible white sclera surrounding the iris. This high-contrast design, a dark circle floating in a white sea, makes our gaze impossible to hide. If you look at a fruit tree, everyone knows you are looking at the fruit tree. If you look at a weapon, everyone knows you are arming yourself. This feature, known as the cooperative eye hypothesis, suggests that we evolved these eyes specifically to share attention. We gave up the poker face of the ape for the transparent gaze of the collaborator. It signals a fundamental shift in our psychology. We stopped trying to trick each other and started trying to help each other. Look at that, our eyes say. Help me with this. It is a biological commitment to teamwork, written in the very structure of our vision. We cannot hide our focus, just as we cannot hide our skin. And then there is the most peculiar, poetic, and baffling betrayal of the naked face: the blush. This is a phenomenon that fascinated and frustrated Charles Darwin, who called it the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. No other animal blushes. It is physically impossible for a chimp to blush because the skin is too dark and the fur too thick to see it, but also because they lack the unique wiring that connects the social brain to the capillaries of the face. When we break a social rule, when we feel embarrassed, ashamed, or praised, the autonomic nervous system triggers a rush of blood to the cheeks, neck, and chest. The naked skin glows red. It is a distress flare. But why would evolution select for a trait that advertises our weakness? Why would we want to show the tribe that we have messed up? The leading theory is that blushing is an apology. It is a non-verbal signal that says, "I know I broke the rule and I care about your opinion of me." It is a sign of a conscience. In a small tribe, where social harmony is life or death, the individual who blushes is trusted more than the stone-faced sociopath who shows no remorse. The blush is a promise of future cooperation. It is a mechanism of peace, made possible only because we lost the mask of fur. It is somewhat humorous to think that our greatest social tool is the one thing we try desperately to suppress during a clumsy first date or an awkward presentation. But our biology betrays us for our own good. We are designed to be transparent. This transparency extends to the lips, another area of naked mucous membrane that became a focal point of interaction. Without a muzzle of fur, the lips became more mobile, more visible, and more sensitive. They became instruments of affection. The kiss, a behavior almost unique to humans, likely evolved from mouth-to-mouth feeding or testing, but flourished because the sensitivity of the naked lips made it a powerful bonding act. The face became a landscape of pleasure as well as communication. We can see the tribe now, waking up, their faces open books to one another. A mother looks at her child and widens her eyes, a universal signal of greeting and reassurance. A hunter looks at his partner and flicks his gaze toward the horizon, a silent command to move. A young lover blushes when their hand is touched. The air is filled with a silent symphony of signals, a constant, high-speed exchange of emotional data that binds the group together tighter than any grooming session ever could. We are reading each other's minds by reading each other's skins. But this newfound sensitivity comes with a price. The naked face is exposed to the elements. The nose, sticking out and unprotected, is prone to frostbite and sunburn. The eyes, unshielded by a heavy brow of hair, squint against the glare. And as the day wears on and the sun begins its long slide toward the west, a new anxiety begins to creep into the tribe. The heat of the day, which drove the loss of the fur, is fleeting. The savanna is a land of extremes. As the sun vanishes, the heat vanishes with it, sucked up into the clear, cloudless sky. The temperature begins to plummet. The fur that was a death trap at noon is a survival necessity at midnight, and we have thrown it away. We are standing in the cooling twilight, naked, shivering, and vulnerable. The biological mortgage is coming due. We traded our coats for cooling, but now the cold is coming to collect. The tribe huddles closer, skin against skin, but body heat alone is not enough to fight the chill of the Pleistocene night. We need a new kind of warmth. We need to steal a piece of the sun and keep it on the ground. The age of biology is ending. The age of the spark is about to begin. The naked ape must now become the fire starter, or perish in the dark. The sun, having ruled the day with an iron fist of heat, finally abdicates its throne. It slips below the horizon, dragging the light down with it, and almost instantly, the world undergoes a terrifying inversion. The Pliocene savanna is a land of binary extremes. It is a furnace by day and a refrigerator by night. As the last bruised purple streaks fade from the sky, the temperature begins a freefall. The dry air, lacking the humidity to hold on to the warmth, hemorrhages heat into the void of space. Within hours, the mercury can drop 40 or 50 degrees. For a leopard or a hyena, wrapped in their double-layered fur coats, this is merely a refreshing change, a signal to wake up and start the hunt. But for the naked ape, it is a crisis. We are standing in the gathering dark, shivering. Our skin, so miraculous at dumping heat at noon, is now a liability. The millions of blood vessels near the surface that acted as radiators are now avenues for heat loss. We clamp our arms around our chests, trying to reduce our surface area, trying to trap a thin layer of warm air against our skin, but it is a losing battle. The wind bites. The cold seeps into the bones. Without the fur, we are ecologically displaced persons, tropical animals stranded in a temperate night. This vulnerability is absolute. A naked human in 50-degree weather burns calories at a furious rate just to stop from shaking apart. If we cannot solve this thermal equation, we will freeze, or worse, our sluggish, cold-stiffened muscles will make us easy snacks for the saber-tooths prowling the perimeter. We need a coat. But since biology has stripped ours away, we must turn to physics. We must create a sun of our own. Enter the red flower. The mastery of fire is often depicted as a sudden eureka moment, a lightning strike, a brave caveman with a torch. But it was likely a long, slow courtship born of desperation. Our ancestors had seen fire for eons, terrifying and destructive, sweeping across the grasslands in the dry season. But the nakedness forced a change in perspective. We stopped running from the flames and started chasing them. We became the keepers of the ember. Imagine the scene. A huddled group of Homo erectus carrying a smoldering branch from a natural wildfire, guarding it like a crown jewel. They feed it dry grass, then twigs, then branches, coaxing the terrifying chemical reaction into a manageable domestic pet. When the flames finally leap up in the center of the camp, pushing back the crushing darkness, everything changes. The fire provides the one thing our skin can no longer give us, an external microclimate. By sitting close to the hearth, we create a bubble of tropical warmth in the middle of the chilly night. We have successfully outsourced our body temperature regulation. We no longer need the biological expensive fur coat because we have the chemical cheap wood fire. It is the first great technological prosthesis. This mastery of fire does more than just warm the skin. It fundamentally alters the architecture of our society. The fire becomes the focal point, the magnet that draws the group together. In the dark, you cannot wander off. You must stay within the circle of light. This enforced proximity creates a new kind of social stage. We sit knee to knee, faces illuminated by the dancing orange glow, while the rest of the world disappears into shadow. It is here, in this circle, that the bonds of the tribe are forged. The fire provides safety. Predators instinctively fear the flames, allowing us to sleep deeply without the constant half-awake vigilance required in the trees. This deep REM-heavy sleep is crucial for the cognitive development of our expanding brains. We are sleeping our way to intelligence, protected by a wall of light. But the fire offers a gift even greater than warmth or safety. It offers the external stomach. This is the essence of the cooking hypothesis, proposed by primatologist Richard Wrangham. He argues that the control of fire and the subsequent cooking of food was the direct biological trigger that allowed us to become human. Raw food is tough. It is hard to chew and difficult to digest. A chimp spends 6 hours a day just chewing. But fire performs a miracle. It pre-digests the food. It breaks down the tough collagen in meat and gelatinizes the starches in tubers, unlocking a massive amount of calories that were previously inaccessible. When we eat cooked food, we get more energy for less work. This surplus energy is exactly what the hungry brain was waiting for. The fire allowed our guts to shrink. We don't need the massive digestive tracts of gorillas anymore, and our brains to expand. We traded a big stomach for a big brain, and the deal was brokered by the flame. It is a profound thought. We are not just the users of fire, we are the product of it. We are the cooking apes. Our very anatomy, small mouths, weak jaws, small teeth, assumes that there will be a fire waiting for us at the end of the day. We have become biologically dependent on a chemical reaction. There is a scholarly tussle over the exact dates, of course. Some archaeologists point to Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, arguing for evidence of controlled fire 1 million years ago. Others are skeptical, pushing the date forward to 400,000 years. But the logic of our nakedness suggests the earlier date is likely true. We could not have survived the cold nights of the migration out of Africa without it. The fire was our portable coat. It allowed us to move into colder climates, into the mountains, into the caves of Europe. It was the key that unlocked the globe. And let's not forget the atmosphere it creates. There is a hypnotic quality to fire, the caveman TV. We are the only animals that will stare into a flame for hours, lost in thought. It calms us. It triggers a primal sense of home. As the flames crackle and pop, sending sparks drifting up toward the stars, the tribe relaxes. The tension of the hunt, the vigilance of the day, melts away. Soft humor finds a place here, perhaps a mimic mocking the clumsy walk of a hyena, or a child trying to catch a smoke ring. The firelight softens the harsh reality of the Stone Age. It makes the naked faces look kinder, the dark skin glow with a warm vitality. It is the original mood lighting. But as the fire dies down, as the embers fade to gray ash, the cold returns. The fire is static. It cannot move with us. We can carry an ember, yes, but we cannot wear the fire while we hunt. We cannot wrap ourselves in flames to cross a mountain pass. The problem of insulation is solved for the night, but not for the journey. We are still trapped by our own skin. To truly conquer the cold, to walk into the ice ages that are looming on the horizon of geological time, we need something more permanent than a fire and more flexible than a cave. We need to steal a skin. We need to look at the animals around us not just as food, but as raw material. The naked ape is about to become the tailor, and the wardrobe of humanity is about to open. The fire is a glorious invention, a captive star that pushes back the night, but it has a fatal flaw. It is anchored to the earth. You cannot wear a bonfire. You cannot wrap a flame around your shoulders and walk into the wind. As our ancestors looked outward from their African cradle, gazing toward the mist-shrouded peaks of the north and the gray horizons of Europe and Asia, they faced a thermal barrier. The world beyond the savanna was cold, bone-cracking, lung-freezing cold. The ice ages were gripping the planet, sending glaciers grinding down from the poles like slow, white bulldozers. To a naked primate, this landscape was a death sentence. We had the cooling system of a tropical sprinter, perfect for a hot afternoon in Kenya, but utterly suicidal for a winter morning in the Caucasus. We were biologically trapped in the tropics, prisoners of our own efficient sweating. But the human mind, fed by fire-cooked protein and honed by the social complexities of the naked face, does not accept traps. It picks locks. And the key to this lock was wandering right in front of us, four-legged and warm. We began to look at the animals around us with a new kind of envy. We saw the wolf, comfortable in the snow. We saw the bear, sleeping soundly in the frost. We saw the bison, steaming in the cold air, impervious to the wind. And a dark, brilliant thought crystallized in the collective mind. If I cannot grow a coat, I will take yours. This is the invention of the second skin. It is a moment of profound theft and profound genius. We are the only creatures on Earth who skin other creatures to wear their hides. It sounds gruesome to modern ears, but to the shivering hunter, it was an act of salvation. Imagine the first crude attempts, a heavy, bloody pelt draped over freezing shoulders. It would have been heavy, stiff, and smelling of copper and rot, but it was warm. For the first time, a human could walk away from the fire and take the warmth with him. He could carry a portable microclimate. However, simply draping a dead animal over your back is not clothing. It is just wearing a carcass. The true revolution lay in the technology of transformation. To turn a raw hide into a soft, flexible, wearable garment is a complex chemical and mechanical process. It requires foresight. You must scrape the skin clean of flesh and fat, a labor-intensive task that led to the development of specific stone tools, the scrapers, which litter the archaeological record like breadcrumbs. You must cure it, perhaps discovering that rubbing the hide with animal brains, which contain emulsifying fats, or smoking it over a fire prevents it from rotting and turning into a stiff board. This is the birth of the leather industry. It is sensory work. The acrid smell of wood smoke, the slick texture of wet hide, the repetitive rhythmic scraping that builds strong arms and patient minds. When the process is done, the result is a material that is windproof, waterproof, and durable. A technological skin that is superior to anything biology could grow on its own. But the story of clothing gets even more specific. We didn't just stop at capes. As we pushed further north into the teeth of the deep cold, we needed more than a loose wrap. We needed a seal. This drove the invention of the awl, a sharp pointed bone tool used to punch holes in leather, and eventually the eyed needle. These tiny slivers of bone are among the most important artifacts in human history. They allowed us to sew. We could cut the leather to fit the shape of the human body, arms, legs, hoods, and stitch it together to create a sealed insulation system. This is the difference between a blanket and a parka. It is a massive cognitive leap. To make a fitted shirt, you must be able to visualize a three-dimensional object, the human torso, flattened into two-dimensional shapes, the pattern pieces, and then reassembled. It is complex topology. It requires a level of spatial reasoning that rivals any modern engineers. And here, the parasites return to whisper a date in our ears. Just as the pubic louse told us when we lost our fur, the body louse tells us when we started getting dressed. The body louse, Pediculus humanus, is a subspecies that adapted specifically to live in the folds of clothing, not on the skin itself. Geneticists have calculated that this subspecies diverged from the head louse roughly 170,000 to 70,000 years ago. This gives us a scholarly stamp on the timeline. Humans were likely wearing regular, substantial clothing by at least 170,000 years ago, coinciding with our push into colder climates and arguably the onset of the penultimate ice age. The lice are the unwanted witnesses to our wardrobe. They moved into the seams of our tunics and traveled the world with us, confirming that by the time we met the Neanderthals, we were already dressed for the occasion. Speaking of Neanderthals, this era of the second skin introduces a fascinating contrast. There is evidence to suggest that while Neanderthals, who were naturally stockier and better adapted to cold, wore loose cape-like garments, modern humans, Homo sapiens, developed more complex fitted multi-layered clothing. We were the tailors of the Paleolithic. We created thermal underwear. We used furs for lining and leather for windbreaking. This technological superiority might have been the edge that allowed us to survive the freezing flicker of climate change while our cousins faded away. We didn't survive because we were tougher. We survived because we were better dressed. There is a psychological shift here as well. When a human puts on the skin of a bear, they are not just staying warm. They are assuming a persona. They are borrowing the power of the animal. This is the root of masquerade, of shamanism, of the uniform. We become wolves in sheep's clothing, or rather, men in wolves' clothing. It allows for a flexibility of identity that no other animal possesses. A naked human is just a human, but a human in a lion skin is a warrior. A human in ermine is a king. We began to use our second skins to tell stories about who we were. We used them to signal status, tribe, and achievement. The honest billboard of the naked skin was now covered by the fabricated billboard of the outfit. We could lie with our clothes. We could make ourselves look bigger, scarier, or more important than we actually were. As we wrap ourselves in these borrowed furs, standing on the edge of a frozen steppe, the wind howling harmlessly against our leather tunics, we feel a new kind of freedom. We are no longer tethered to the equator. We are no longer afraid of the frost. We have become the animal that changes its skin at will. The world is opening up. We can cross the land bridge to the Americas. We can hike the highlands of Tibet. We are the ultimate invasive species, insulated against the environment by the skins of the creatures we conquered. But as the snow begins to fall, dusting our fur hoods with white powder, we realize that even the best parka has its limits. We can walk in the cold, but we cannot live in it. We need a place to rest. We need a space that is not just warm, but static. We need to stop hiding under trees and start building them. The nomad is getting tired of the wind. The age of the architect is approaching, and the naked ape is about to build a womb of his own. The wind has a voice, and in the deep frozen north of the Pleistocene epoch, that voice is a scream. It tears across the steppe, stripping the heat from anything it touches, finding the smallest gap in a fur tunic, the tiniest tear in a leather boot. We have mastered the fire, which pushes back the dark, and we have stolen the skins of the beasts, which pushes back the frost, but we are still exposed. We are still small, soft creatures standing on the surface of a planet that is indifferent to our comfort. To sleep in the open, even wrapped in furs, is to sleep with one eye open, bracing against the sudden gust or the drifting snow. The naked ape, stripped of its biological insulation, finds that the world is too big, too loud, and too uncontrolled. We need to shrink the world. We need to create a space that obeys us, a pocket of stillness in a universe of motion. And so, we turn from tailors into architects. We begin to build the artificial womb. This transition from finding shelter to making shelter is a pivotal moment in the human story, a psychological leap as vast as the invention of the tool. For millions of years, home was wherever you happened to stop walking. It was a branch, a rock overhang, or a dense thicket. But now, home becomes a concept, a destination, a place that exists because we willed it into being. We stop looking for caves, which are dark, damp, often occupied by grumpy cave bears, and conveniently located nowhere near the good hunting grounds. And we decide to build our own caves exactly where we want them. Imagine the scene on the sweeping treeless plains of what is now Ukraine, some 15,000 years ago. The materials are scarce. There is no wood, no stone, only the endless grass and the howling wind. But there are bones. Massive, bleached architectural bones of the woolly mammoth. Our ancestors, driven by the need to protect their fragile, hairless bodies, become engineers of the macabre. They drag the heavy skulls, the curved tusks, and the lattice-like ribs of the fallen giants, arranging them in intricate, interlocking circles. This is the Mesurich site, a place that still stuns archaeologists today. These were not messy piles, they were masterpieces of design. The skulls formed the foundation, the tusks formed the archways, and the ribs were woven together to create a roof support over which heavy hides were draped and weighed down with sod. Inside this structure, the laws of physics seem to change. Step through the entrance, past the curtain of hide, and the screaming wind falls silent. The air is still. The smell is thick, earthy, musky, smelling of old ivory and wood smoke. But it is warm. In the center, a hearth burns, not wildly as it does in the open, but steadily, its heat trapped by the bone walls and radiating back down from the skin roof. The temperature inside might be 60 degrees warmer than the blizzard raging just a few feet away. It is a technological miracle. We have created a bubble of the African savanna in the middle of the Ice Age. This invention of indoors fundamentally reshapes the human mind. For the first time, there's a boundary between us and them, between the domestic and the wild. Outside is chaos, inside is order. Outside is cold, inside is warm. This separation allows for a new kind of relaxation. In the open, vigilance is 360 degrees. In the shelter, you only have to watch the door. The heart rate slows, the muscles loosen. The naked skin, so sensitive to the draft, can finally relax. We can take off the heavy furs, the boots, the layers, and return to our natural state of nakedness within the safety of the walls. It is the first time we can be truly comfortable since we left the tropical forests millions of years ago. The shelter is the ultimate prosthetic coat, big enough to fit the whole family. And with this comfort comes a new kind of clutter. Because we have a permanent base, we can accumulate stuff. We don't have to carry everything on our backs every morning. We can store extra food, spare tools, good stones, soft furs. We become hoarders. We become investors in objects. The archaeological record shows a density of artifacts inside these shelters that speaks to a settled, complex life. We find needles, beads, carved figurines, the treasures of a life that has time to make things just because they are beautiful. There is a scholarly debate that murmurs around the foundations of these first houses, a disagreement about the sedentism of early humans. Did we build these massive bone huts to live in year-round, or were they seasonal winter homes, abandoned when the thaw came? The sheer effort of construction, some of these mammoth bone huts required the remains of over 90 mammoths, suggests a sense of permanence, or at least a very serious commitment to coming back. It implies that home was becoming a fixed point in the mental map, a center of gravity that pulled the tribe back together. And let's appreciate the soft humor of the domestic squabble that likely started here. With the invention of the house comes the invention of housework. Who left the mammoth tusk in the doorway? Why is the hide curtain not closed? You're tracking mud onto the clean furs. The mundane frustrations of cohabitation are as old as the walls themselves. We built walls to keep the weather out, but we locked each other in. But the shelter does more than just annoy us with chores. It allows us to colonize the impossible. Because we can build our own environment, we are no longer restricted by the environment outside. We can live in the Arctic, the desert, the rainforest, the high mountains. We become the most widespread mammal on Earth, not because we adapt our bodies to these places, but because we build little boxes of tropical Africa and place them wherever we go. An igloo is just a snowy version of the womb. A Bedouin tent is a fabric version. They all serve the same purpose, to protect the naked, sweating, shivering ape from the reality of the planet. We are the astronauts of Earth, always living inside our life support systems. As the storm rages outside the mammoth bone hut, the tribe settles in for the night. The fire casts long, dancing shadows on the curved ribs of the ceiling, looking like the belly of a great beast. The physical world is shut out. The wind cannot touch them. The predators cannot see them. The nakedness that was their greatest vulnerability has forced them to become the masters of their own domain. But now, safe inside, warm and fed, a new vacuum opens up. The physical problems are solved, the bodies are comfortable, but the minds are awake. They are sitting knee to knee, face to face, illuminated by the firelight, with hours of darkness stretching ahead of them. There are no fleas to pick. The smoke and the new hygiene have taken care of that. The old pastime of grooming is gone. The hands are idle. The silence of the shelter is heavy. It demands to be filled. And so, the urge to touch shifts into the urge to speak. The grooming of the fur is about to be replaced by the grooming of the voice. The most complex software of the human experience is about to be installed in the hardware of the hut. We are safe enough to talk. The fire crackles in the center of the mammoth bone hut, a rhythmic percussion to the silence that hangs heavy in the air. The physical work of the day is done. The shelter is built. The skins are sewn. The bellies are full. In the ancient furry past, this would be the time for the great communal ritual, the grooming. We would sit in long, contented lines, picking through each other's coats, removing the ticks and the debris, our fingers working in a hypnotic rhythm that released a steady drip, drip, drip of natural opiates into our brains. It was the biological glue of the primate world. It said, "I touch you, therefore I am with you." But look at us now. We are naked. Our skin is smooth, clean, and largely free of the parasites that required such constant vigilance. There is nothing to pick. There is no fur to part. The manual labor of affection has been rendered obsolete by our own hygiene. This creates a profound social crisis. If we stop touching, do we stop bonding? If we stop grooming, does the tribe fall apart? The silence in the hut is not just quiet. It is dangerous. It is the sound of connections fraying. But the naked ape is an innovator of the highest order. We cannot stroke the fur of 40 people in a single evening. It is mathematically impossible. Our fingers are too slow, and the group has grown too large. So, we invent a way to groom without touching. We invent a way to stroke the mind instead of the body. We open our mouths and we begin to speak. This transition from physical grooming to vocal grooming is one of the most compelling theories in evolutionary psychology, championed by the anthropologist Robin Dunbar. He argues that language did not evolve primarily to discuss the location of bison or the best way to make a spear. You can do that with pointing and grunts. Language evolved to replace the fingers. It evolved to handle the social complexity of a naked, expanding tribe. Think about the efficiency of it. When you groom someone physically, it is a one-on-one transaction. You are occupied. You cannot eat, you cannot work, and you cannot groom anyone else. But with a voice, you can groom 4 or 5 people simultaneously. You can sit by the fire and tell a joke, and everyone who laughs receives a little hit of dopamine, a little stroke of connection. You are weaving a web of social bonding that is invisible, weightless, and infinitely scalable. The voice allows us to touch each other across the room, across the dark, even around corners. It is a long-distance caress. And what do we talk about in these first tentative conversations? We do not discuss philosophy or thermodynamics. We talk about each other. We talk about who is sleeping with whom, who stole the extra portion of meat, who is lazy, and who can be trusted. We invent gossip. It is easy to dismiss gossip as trivial, but in the context of the Stone Age, it is life-saving data processing. It is the original social network. By sharing information about the reputation of others, we can navigate the complex politics of the group without having to physically fight every battle. "Don't trust him," a whisper in the dark says. "He didn't share his kill." That sentence is worth 1,000 hours of trial and error. It creates a moral universe. It creates a reputation economy. It allows the naked ape to police the tribe using shame and praise rather than just teeth and fists. There is a soft, relatable humor in realizing that the grand engine of human language, the tool that would eventually write Hamlet and the Declaration of Independence, likely started as a way to complain about the neighbors. We are a species built on the foundation of chatting. To support this new habit, our bodies underwent yet another risky renovation. To speak, we needed a new instrument. Over thousands of years, the human larynx, the voice box, descended lower into the throat. This created a larger resonating chamber, allowing us to produce the incredible range of vowels and consonants that make up speech, the sharp K, the rolling R, the soft shesh. But this lowered larynx came with a deadly design flaw. It crossed the airway with the foodway. We are the only animals that can easily choke to death on our own dinner. Every time you swallow, you are taking a tiny risk for the sake of your ability to speak. Nature decided that the power of the word was worth the risk of the choke. It was a trade-off. We gave up the safety of swallowing for the magic of storytelling, and magic it was. As the fire burns low and the gossip fades, the voices change tone. They become rhythmic, they become narrative. The elder begins to speak not of the present, but of the past. "Long ago," he begins, "when the moon was young." This is the birth of the myth. The nakedness of our bodies, so vulnerable to the elements, finds a new covering in the fabric of the story. We wrap ourselves in legends. We explain the thunder, the seasons, the movement of the herds. These stories are not just entertainment, they are the software of survival. They encode the wisdom of the ancestors, where the water holes are, which plants kill, how to track a wolf, and transmit it to the next generation in a package that is easy to remember. A fact is fragile. A story is sticky. The children listening, their eyes wide in the firelight, are downloading the collective operating system of their people. This vocal grooming changes the very texture of the night. In the silence of the pre-linguistic world, the dark was a place of isolation. But now, the dark is filled with voices. It is filled with the comfort of shared consciousness. We are no longer alone in our own heads. We can pour our fears, our dreams, and our love into the air and have them received by another. This is the ultimate compensation for the loss of our fur. We lost the warmth of the coat, but we gained the warmth of the word. We lost the protection of the hide, but we gained the protection of the promise. "I will watch the fire," someone says. "I will help you tomorrow," says another. These are bindings stronger than any carrot and fiber. As the camera of our history pulls back from the mammoth bone hut, we see it glowing like a lantern on the snowy steppe, a tiny island of light and sound in a vast, silent ocean of ice. Inside, the naked apes are doing something no other creature on Earth can do. They are constructing a reality out of thin air. They are turning breath into truth. The physical evolution is largely complete. We have the sweat glands, the dark skin, or the pale skin, depending on the latitude, the big brain, the tools, the fire, the clothes, and the shelter. We are physically modern. But the psychological evolution, the crafting of the soul that lives inside this naked shell, is just beginning. The journey from the thick coat to the thick dictionary is complete. We have stripped down to the skin to conquer the world, and now we have filled the silence of that world with our own voices. The fire is dying down now. The stories are winding to a close. The listeners are drifting toward sleep, their heads filled with the rhythms of the first lullabies. And as they sleep, we prepare for one final look at this strange, hairless, sweating, talking, dreaming creature, to see what we have truly become. We have traveled a great distance together, you and I. From the deep dappled shade of the Miocene forests, where our ancestors slept in coats of russet fur, across the burning anvil of the Pliocene savanna where we learned to sweat and run, through the freezing nights of the Ice Age where we stole the skins of bears and built cathedrals of mammoth bone. Now, the camera of our history glides forward, blurring through the centuries, past the rise of agriculture, the building of stone cities, the weaving of silk and cotton, until it comes to rest, finally and gently, in the present moment. It stops in front of a mirror. Look at the creature reflected there. It is a strange being, is it not? A biological oddity. If an alien biologist were to catalog the primates of Earth, they would list the chimpanzee, the bonobo, the gorilla, the orangutan, all magnificently furry, all wearing their nature on the outside. And then, there is us, the naked ape. We are the exception that proves the rule. Standing before the glass, we see the culmination of 6 million years of subtraction. We see the vulnerability that forced us to become clever. We see the skin that became a canvas for the soul. But this mirror reveals one last profound truth about our hairlessness. It has frozen us in time. There is a concept in evolutionary biology called neoteny, or the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. If you look at a baby chimpanzee, it has a flat face, a large head relative to its body, big eyes, and, crucially, very sparse hair on its face and chest. As it grows, it develops a snout, a heavy brow, and a thick coat. But humans, we never grow the snout, we never grow the heavy brow, and we never grow the coat. In a biological sense, we are the Peter Pans of the primate order. We are the apes that never grew up. We retain the softness, the smoothness, and the hairlessness of infancy for our entire lives. This eternal youth is not just a cosmetic accident, it is a psychological weapon. Soft, hairless skin elicits a caretaking response. It triggers the instinct to nurture. By looking like babies, even when we are adults, we subconsciously encourage kindness and cooperation within the tribe. We are built to be loved. We are designed to be held. This deep-seated need for connection is wired into the very nerves of our skin. Modern neuroscience has identified a specific type of nerve fiber in human skin called C-tactile efferents. These nerves are not for feeling heat or pain or texture. They are tuned to one specific frequency, a slow, gentle stroke, moving at about 3 centimeters per second, the exact speed of a mother caressing a child or a lover stroking an arm. When these nerves are activated, they send signals directly to the emotional centers of the brain, reducing cortisol and flooding the system with peace. This is the echo of the grooming we left behind on the savannah. We may have lost the fur, but we kept the hunger for the touch that used to comb through it. We are a species that literally withers without skin-to-skin contact. We are wired for the caress. And yet, look at the irony of our modern existence. We are the naked ape that is almost never naked. We spent millions of years shedding our fur to dump heat and signal health, and then we spent the last few thousand years covering it all back up again. We are obsessed with our second skins. We use clothing not just for warmth, but for language. A suit says power. A uniform says order. A silk dress says elegance. We have replaced the biological signaling of the coat with the cultural signaling of the cloth. We have become the only animal that feels naked without artificial layers. We have developed a sense of modesty, a shame about the very adaptation that saved us. It is a gentle, humorous paradox. We spend our lives trying to cover the body that we worked so hard to reveal. And when we do reveal it, we are rarely satisfied. We are the only species that actively wars against its own remaining hair. We shave, we wax, we pluck, we laser. We are constantly trying to finish the job that evolution started, striving for a level of smoothness that nature never quite intended. We are the perfectionists of our own pelts, forever chasing the ideal of the honest billboard we invented around the campfire. But beneath the clothes, beneath the anxieties, the skin remains our most honest boundary. It is where I ends and you begins. It is the frontier of our existence. Think of the phrases we use: thick-skinned, thin-skinned, comfortable in your own skin. We equate our character with our casing, and in a way, this is the ultimate legacy of our hairlessness. By stripping away the fur, we stripped away the disguise. We forced ourselves to be seen. We forced ourselves to be readable. We forced ourselves to be vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, we found our greatest strength. We found that we could not survive alone, so we built families. We found that we could not survive the cold, so we built fires. We found that we could not survive the silence, so we built stories. The loss of our fur was the catalyst for the birth of our humanity. It was the moment we stopped relying on what we were born with and started relying on what we could create. The camera pulls back now, leaving the mirror, leaving the room, rising up above the house, above the city, above the sleeping continent. We see the world as it is tonight, a vast, glittering web of lights connected by invisible threads of conversation, warmth, and shared history. Down there, in the millions of comfortable beds, are the descendants of those shivering, sweating, running ancestors. We are safe now. The lions are gone. The freezing wind is locked outside the glass. The hunger is abated. We have constructed a world that caters to our nakedness, a world of soft sheets, climate control, and warm embraces. We have turned the entire planet into the mammoth bone hut. The journey is complete. The biological striptease that began 6 million years ago has led us here, to this moment of quiet comfort. We are the naked kings and queens of the earth, resting in the sanctuary we built with our own hands. The fur is gone, but the warmth remains, not on our backs, but in our hearts, in our hearths, and in the gentle unseen touch of the history that holds us all. The story is told. The fire has burned down to soft, glowing embers, casting a faint, warm light against the walls of your mind. The long run across the savannah is over. The frantic heat of the day has faded into the cool, reassuring stillness of the night. You do not need to run anymore. You do not need to hunt or build or think. You are safe. Feel the weight of the blankets over you, your second skin, soft and heavy, holding you in a warm embrace that asks for nothing in return. Let your breathing slow down, matching the rhythm of the ancient seasons, steady, deep, and calm. The wind may blow outside, but here, in your shelter, the air is still. The millions of years of struggle, of adaptation, of change have all been for this, so that you could lie here, perfectly comfortable, perfectly at peace, drifting on the river of time. The past is a heavy coat you can take off now. Let it slide from your shoulders. Let your muscles relax, unknitting the tension of the day. You are the master of the fire, the architect of the dream, the child of the stars. The darkness is not empty. It is a velvet blanket wrapping you in safety. Close your eyes. The world is waiting for you to sleep. Sweet dreams.